We're going to have a look at how to create lighting and electrical layouts or plans, and also how to create schedules from those as well. We've done a bit on this before, but I wanted us to get a little bit more detail tonight, and for some people, maybe explain it from scratch. So this is what a general floor plan should look like. General, by that I mean normal or maybe general arrangement. So it's showing the layout of the floor plan. We're seeing dimensions, we're seeing fixtures and maybe furniture, depending on what it's for, whether it's for maybe a design concept presentation or DA, or maybe it's a construction documentation. When it's for construction, we won't be showing furniture. We only want to show things that the builder's going to be building. So obviously for maybe pricing or construction purposes, we will want to show the builder and therefore the electrician what we want for lighting and electrical and where we want that. So we need to create multiple elements. Now this plan is a floor plan. It's showing the floor. Now to show lighting, we probably want to show the ceiling. So we can have a reflected ceiling plan. You can see that I've already created this as a save view. What is this? Basically, it's a view of the same story but with different settings. So if I look at the settings of this view settings, we see that it's currently set on a layer combination of plan, floor, documentation, whereas the reflected ceiling plan is set on a layer combination called plan RCP. What's RCP? Reflected ceiling plan. If we go into Control L or Option Element Attributes Layer Settings, this is what we're talking about. The way that I do this is on the left-hand side layer combination. I set this up as drawings or plans, and so each layer combination is the same as what a drawing that I might want to be printing out. And then in the right-hand side is the layer. The layer is all the different possibilities of ways that I want to separate my 3D and my 2D elements. So I create a new layer for each of the different possibilities. So the way that I generally do that is I create lots of layers for all the 3D elements and then a few layers for all of the 2D elements. To keep this simple, I've kept all of the general 2D stuff on a layer called RMD overlay, and then I make a layer name that basically aligns with each one of these. So ceiling, demolition, electrical, lighting, they're all different layers that I can turn on or turn off, and they've got independent information which could be 3D. It's commonly 2D, which is only relevant for that particular layer combination because it's only relevant for that particular drawing. So this is the way we're working in Archicad. Of course, I'll have the same sort of setup for dimensions because I want to do the same sort of idea with dimensions. We don't copy and paste. So when you've used AutoCAD, maybe you've copy, drag a copy, and you've got multiple drawings on a page. We don't do that in Archicad. It's really bad management, makes your file size big, and it means you're duplicating errors. So if you need to fix things, you need to fix them more than once. We don't do that in Archicad. Instead, we have stories. So we place different information on different stories, which builds up a 3D model. And we also, in order to show multiple types of drawings on any particular story, we use different layers. So Option Element Attributes Layers, select all, turn them all on, and we see if we turn everything on in one go, it's really messy and it's too hard to see. So that's why we break up information onto multiple drawings. So using my save views is just a fast way to flick between these because they're preset with save views, and the most important save view option that I've got here is my layer combination. There's a few others that I could be using, such as these ones here, maybe scale as well, but that's mainly it. Alright, so that's a general floor plan. This is the general explanation of what we're talking about. We could have a reflected ceiling plan, which just means we're showing the ceiling, not the floor. What would we be showing in the ceiling? We could be showing lighting. We could just be showing materiality. In this case, we're also showing structure because we're talking about big exposed trusses or roof frames. We can have an electrical plan. When I do my electrical plan, I base it on a floor plan. I just simplify it. So you can see that I've taken out some of the information based on the flooring, some of the information based on furniture, and I'm showing some symbols. The way that I'm doing that in this case is that my electrical symbols are red, I've just started here, and the intention is that once I've created one, I can then just duplicate this and place it where I want it to go. Now we might need different symbols for different things. So if I'm doing an outside PowerPoint, then maybe it's going to need to be a waterproof PowerPoint. So I'm going to need to add a different symbol or some extra information to be able to show how that works. So let's just move this over here and go into where we find this symbol. What is this? It's a library part, which means it's from our object library. The one that we select, we can see up in the info box. If we go into this, we see that this is found under our electrical symbols, which is found under our 2D elements. So there's a fairly decent list here already. Now again, this is 2D elements. We could make this 3D options, 3D elements. We could use a 3D object. Archicad doesn't necessarily have a lot of those for electrical. It has more of those for lighting. We'll look at those later. And we don't find them under objects. We find those under lamps generally. But what we're looking for is something. It doesn't need to necessarily be the right thing. It would be great if it was, but we need it to be identifiable or different, and then we can adjust it. So if this is the symbol that I've used for my general PowerPoint, I'm not going to have a large variety. Then I'm going to need to choose another one for an exterior. So maybe I'll use this one here with a cross through it white, just because it's different. So as long as it represents a little bit different on the plan, a little bit different in the symbol, that's all that I really need. So I haven't done much yet in terms of just creating this as a diagram. I've used this one here. This one's just to represent data. It's called transformer, but again, the name doesn't necessarily matter for what we're trying to do. As long as your symbol legend works, that's all that matters. Now, if you wanted to, and what I've done in other videos and other projects, is to create my own symbols, and then we can make them look and say whatever we want. But for now, let's just keep this simple, and I want to keep it just using the Archicad library parts. So that's what an electrical plan might look like. The other type that I use is called a lighting plan, and I do that separately. So you see that my electrical plan was based on a floor plan, and my lighting plan is based on a reflected ceiling plan. So just, again, whole house, I'm just focusing on a little bit at the moment. What is a lighting plan? What we're doing is showing switching. So again, let's go into this. We see that this is again found under our 2D elements, electrical symbol switches. And we have different poles, 1, 2, 3. How many different light switches are connected to this? I'm also indicating that with these lines. These are splines, and these aren't going to be referenced. What do these mean? They're just showing the lights that are connected to one switch. These are on one circuit, if you like. The reason why I'm using splines is I deliberately want to be organic. I don't want these lines to be confusing. And even though I do not want the electrician to run these lines in the orientation that I'm showing them, it's helping them to be identifiable. If they were straight lines, if they were overlapping, let's just pick up one and do that. If I was being a little bit lazy and did something like this, it would be very hard to understand where these lines went. Now, I could also make these solid lines rather than dashed if necessary. I find dashed works pretty well. But I could do the same thing like that as well if I wanted to. And that might make it a little bit clearer, or it might make it a little bit more complicated. So I'll probably keep it like this. So we've got the light switches or the light poles in Archicad, and then we've got the lamps. How do we create the lamps? Let's go into this one. What is it? It's a lamp. Where do we find lamps? Under More, down the bottom of our toolbox. Lamp tool. We go in here, and we can see that we have under the Archicad lamp library, general, interior, street, and so that's actually a 3D object, has a 3D setting, and within this particular object there's a lot of different options. So we go to lamp style, and there's a lot of different 3D representations of what we're after. And then when we go to floor plan presentation, floor plan representation, there's a few different methods. So if we go back here, we can see that there's a few different ways that we can view that. Realistic is obviously not very helpful as a symbol. We've got the electrical symbol, we've got the reflected ceiling plan symbol, and we've got by MVO. again, which is based on the 3D object. So we can go to any of these, and so it doesn't matter necessarily what we want or what we choose. We just need something, again, for me, in terms of a symbol that represents well. The other thing is we don't necessarily want to represent it at its true size. So this wall light might only be 100 millimeters wide, but if I represent it too small, or 50 millimeters wide, if I represent it too small, I'm not going to see it. So I need to make it big because it's a symbol. It doesn't have to be real, it just has to be a representation. Now, that's our floor plan. Obviously, we're going to duplicate all of these things, but this is what we do. I like using red. I've talked about this a bit. I know it's not Australian standards. I apologize if I'm misleading people. I like using it because it's much easier for the electrician to identify. It's much easier for me to identify in the plan, but most importantly, if it's printed in black and white, it still works, and that's the most important thing. I don't need it to be red. The red just hopefully makes it a bit more identifiable. Now, if we go to our schedules, then I've created one in here called electrical. I've got one in here called lighting. And the intention of this is that I can have all of my library parts all visible and being quantified for me. And you note that they've got different names. So what we can also do is change their name. So their Archicad name is called Recessed Spot or Pendant Lamp 21. So this is a name that's important for Archicad, but it's not a name that's really helpful for me. So what we can do with any of these symbols, so let's just choose one of these. If we want to click on something and we can't find it because there's multiple elements there, if we press Tab, then that will toggle through the different elements. So we see this one's called Pendant Lamp 21 when we go into the symbol, but when we go down into classification and properties, we can change the ID. So you can see that I've changed the ID to be called Pendant A. So this is a really good way of being able to manually customize, and they're all called the same, or we could change them to have multiple names if we want to, which means that they group together very well in our schedule, and we can identify them very easily. I'm keeping this here just for my own benefit, but at any point I can go into my scheme setting and just turn the library part name off, so that doesn't represent, because no one else, the electrician for instance, doesn't care about this. They're just interested in this. Now, what am I missing? I'm missing my label legend, and so I'd need to have on the top of my page. So once I create this as a drawing, so let's look at a cheat way of doing this. I'm going to copy Control C or Command C, my floor plan. I'm going to place this on my lighting story. Lighting layout. Now you note that I've already got a legend here in my layout. This is an old one, so I'll need to update this based on the new settings. Sorry if that didn't come across really well. And this is currently my floor plan, my general floor plan. So I need to relink this with the new drawing. And this is just a clever way of doing it rather than placing it like you might have seen me do before. Right click, link drawing to, and based on my view plan, I can then find the one that's relevant for this link. And the nice thing about this is it places it in the same place. So just, yeah, a clever little tool, maybe if that's what you want to do. Let's get rid of that for a second. So we can see that's here. We'd need to have a legend that explains that. And now we could, if we wanted to, once I've created this, let's save this as a saved view under schedules, I don't know if I say that right. Lighting, create, drag and drop. And turn that title off. Now my text size is massive, so I could either go into my schedule and change it, or I could just go to size as appearance and maybe just magnify this to 50%. Now the really cool thing about this is if I want to, because this is a reference drawing, I could just make it smaller. Let's go into the setting, frame, manually resize, and then I can just grab this edge. It's going to let me do it. There we go. And stretch this edge so we can't see that other column anymore. So now we're only seeing the element ID, the quantity, and the home story. And of course, this can get bigger and be added to. This is updatable. This auto updates, so that way I can build my drawing, my layout, and then I can keep adding information to it as I go on, and it will change automatically. So let's go into this one in a bit more detail now and show you how this one works, how we created it. When we go to the scheme settings, what we're doing here is using criteria. So I'm creating this from a lamp tool or an object tool with a layer called RMD overlay lighting. So that's everything that's on that layer. The other way that I could do this, and then down in the fields, I'm using element ID, quantity, home story, and library part name. Again, and I don't necessarily need that last one, it's just there for my own benefit. Then over here, I'm clicking merge uniform items, so that way it gives me a quantity. If I don't click that, it'll just keep everything in its own individual instance, so that's not necessarily helpful. And if we just go back to the electrical one, we can see this works in the same way. Merge these together. I haven't updated these as IDs yet, so I can change that as well. And if we go into this scheme setting, we can see that I've done this differently just to show you that we can base this on a lot of different settings. So because I've used this pen 250 for all of my electrical and lighting, I don't necessarily need to choose objects. I don't necessarily need to choose layer combinations. I can choose a lot of different things if I want to. I can choose fill pens. I can choose, let's close that down. I can choose geometry. I can choose the size of it. I can choose where it is. So there's a whole heap of settings that we can use to find it. I can use the element ID itself. So this is just one way, simple way of grouping everything together, but again, there's a lot of different methods for that. So hopefully this has given you some ideas. Mine's not perfect. I'm probably going to develop it further, but this is a general understanding of how to create lighting layouts. Let's go back to that. Lighting layouts, electrical layouts, and how to create the schedules for them as well. Hope it's helpful.